Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Travel Weekly webcast. My name is Holly and I am editor of Aspire magazine, Travel Weekly's sister title. And I'm joined today by three lovely gentlemen. We've got Dean Harvey, who's marketing director at Kuoni. We've got David Forder, who is head of marketing at Advantage Travel Partnership. And we've got Steve Dunne, who's chief executive of Digital Drums. Thank you all for joining me today. I know everyone's very busy, so thank you very much.
Hi Holly, how you doing?
Good, thank you very much. So if you haven't guessed from their job titles and their companies, we're talking about marketing today, current marketing strategies, navigating the strange circumstances we find ourselves in and where we might end up with marketing strategies as we come out of this strange scenario. So let's start by talking to you, Steve. More and more brands are slowly starting to come out on social media and digital platforms with new campaigns, which I guess have a slightly different tone to what their normal campaigns may look like. So what kind of things are you seeing on social media? What's caught your eye?
Well, I think if you take it back one step, the big problems that the industry faces is that, this is a shock to the system for everybody, and it's very, very difficult to sell to a market that would probably love to buy, but isn't in a position to do so at the moment, and also has quite pressing things of another nature on its mind. So getting the sentiment right, getting the tone of voice right, and the kind of content you're going to put out there, they're the real big challenges for all the marketing organizations, whether it's destinations or brands or anything in between. And what I've really noticed, and I have commentated on the industry from a marketing perspective for about a decade now, is that we've got some really, really sophisticated marketeers in this industry. And I think we're showing the way forward to maybe other sectors. And let me explain what I mean by that. Traditionally, when you're selling travel, and I've written about this many, many times in the past and spoken about it, essentially, if you boil it all down, we all sell the same thing, which is beaches and lovely scenery and pools and, you know, cultural experiences and stuff like that. So it's very, very difficult to either brand your business, or that's the challenge, so that people remember you from another brand. And secondly, to resonate in a way that I'm seeing something slightly different to what I've seen before. And what I've seen over this last week and a half or so is an emergence of some pretty good campaigns that are avoiding some of the traditional stuff. So the Jamaica Tourist Board, for example, they're doing things like having a sort of cook-alongs on Instagram and stuff like that, which really makes you feel you're experiencing Jamaica. You're not just seeing scenery, you're actually getting into the culture. They've got wellness sessions, they've got DJ sets playing music from that part of the world, which is the kind of stuff you want to hear. And the thing I really loved was they've created this Spotify playlist, which is called Every Little Thing's Gonna Be All Right. And that's kind of absolutely tuned in for right now. That's the kind of thing that we want to hear. So that's brilliant. And then you've got people like Visit Malta. And again, they're teaching us every Friday language lessons in Maltese. Now that's very, very different from just seeing a bit of scenery. There's nothing wrong with seeing scenery, by the way, but that is terrific, terrific stuff. And then Intrepid, who are inviting people. They've done a takeover of their social media channels by their guests and visitors, but also they're inviting you to write a letter to somebody that you've experienced travel with before. So I think the first guy that did it was a blind guy who from Colorado, I think he was, but he had basically written to his guide that had taken him on the path of Machu Picchu, and he'd written about his experience. And that's another differentiation that gets you into the travel mindset. It gets you motivated, but it's different. And I like that as well. And then, you know, lots of other people, even closer to home, people like Visit Guernsey, who have had their whole 75th anniversary of the end of the war, World War II, completely taken off the map for them by COVID-19. But what they're doing now is they're doing virtual tours of various different sites that apply to the end of World War II. But they're also doing cookery lessons from World War II and what people were eating in those days. And that to me is the real innovative stuff we're seeing in marketing. And of course, I couldn't let Kuoni go. I'm sitting here with the master marketeer here. And what they're doing is fantastic as well. That whole sort of relaxation and seeing a bit of safari, or, you know, the Italian rivers and all that sort of stuff. That's great stuff as well. And then the last bit, by the way, is South Africa doing their virtual safaris, where if you can't get to Africa, Africa comes to you into your front room. And that's the one we've been watching because my wife's really into wildlife. So fantastic examples across the board by the sector.
And you'd say the timing is right for those kind of campaigns. Obviously, the industry is getting a lot of flack from consumers at this time, who may not have had refunds or may not have necessarily got what they wanted out of their future travel plans. So you say the timing is right for what they're doing?
Yeah, I think it is. We're about to, well, who knows where we are in lockdown, but if it goes on for maybe another 3 or 4 weeks, and then travel has a bigger period after that to reacclimatise, this is probably right. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, this would have been possibly the wrong thing to do. But I think you've got to keep it soft. There's got to be no sales. It's all sort of subliminal and inspirational, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel and all that sort of stuff. That is the tone of voice. And I think the sentiment and the tone of voice is, for the majority of organisations, bang on right. I mean, you could get it wrong. We saw a well-known awards ceremony announce a COVID-19 category, which was, the timing was terrible. The intention was right, but the timing was shocking. The framing of the message was shocking. And that kind of demonstrated that there is a skill to marketing. And it is down to things like timing and how you frame the message and the type of content you play. And I think now is the right time to be starting what I call soft marketing.
Okay, so you mentioned obviously Kuoni's efforts. So Dean, let's talk about what you guys have been up to at Kuoni. I can't imagine the planning. Normally, I imagine when you launch a campaign, there's months and months of planning, and what you're able to go through, and you're going through cuts and cuts of footage and all sorts of things. So talk to me about the process this time around, because I imagine it was quite different for you guys. You had to.
Yeah, you got to be fleet of foot, and I think the other aspect of this as well is that, like many other companies, we're not working at full capacity on resource. We've furloughed a number of people. So my team, my expanded marketing team, is usually over 20 people, and we're down to just 5. So not only are we having to work quickly in an agile way, but we're also doing it with far fewer people. So, you know, a big shout out to my team. So just picking up on a couple of points that Steve raised, and thank you, Steve, very kind comment. So as we went into this crisis, the nature certainly of our social media comms very quickly had to change. Yeah. And it became very factual based, two-way dialogue based conversations with our customers, as the FCO released daily advice as borders were closing. So we switched our platforms very quickly in terms of what they're designed to do. So very quickly, turn off your sales messages, turn off your normal marketing comms. You're into crisis communications. And one of the things that we did at Kuoni was hand the keys, if you like, of all of our social platforms and our email platforms across to our PR department. So that'll be very resonant with you, Steve, as well, I'm guessing. So, you know, this was not a time for marketing communications. This is a time for customer service communications, and so we seconded one of our team across to Rachel, who heads up our PR function, and they held the reins for a good 10 days, which was the right thing to do. And as Steve's alluded to, we're now in a position where perhaps people are thawing a little bit and are receptive now to slightly softer marketing messages, slightly softer sales messages, and we're actually planning for the next step ahead as well, is when people are more ready for more tactical sales messages. So we, once PR had released the reins back to marketing, we're very fortunate. We've got reels and reels of old destination footage that we've shot for destination films. We've got a really supportive video company, and I will give them a shout out. They're based in Brighton, and they're called Progress Films, and they're great. So they were able to supply us with well scripted responses to our briefs. And so the first film we launched was a film about our people. It was very human. It discussed how, as an operation, we got everybody back home, and it talked about the willingness to serve the consumer well. So it was a real insight into the brand. And the next film that we went into just before the Easter weekend was, I mean, I call it more of a brand film, but this was very softly. This was about, now's not the time to travel. but we get travel. We're really passionate about it. And when the time is right, we will be there for you. And both of those films, respectively, have had over 30,000 views. And then with like most social media channels, you can't just go with these big tentpole, big brand films. You need to be always on. And so the same company came up with this idea of Kuoni moments, as Steve alluded to, just little tiny snippets of a single shot, perhaps a rising drone as we had over Shirley Heights in Antigua, or just a single locked off shot of grass blowing in Italy.
It's so lovely, they're very relaxing.
Thank you. Yeah, and look, I mean, all of our marketing stuff, certainly on social, has to hit three filters for me. So is it useful? Is it interesting? So is it useful? Is it interesting? And is it on topic? And a lot of brands fall foul and kind of wander off and get involved in all kinds of things. But so all of my comms, if they hit one or all of those three filters, then it's probably right to release to the market. So those moments films are currently tracking at around about 5,000 views each. Just a nice little 30-second snippet. You can relax. There's a bit of intrigue in there. We haven't told people where the place is. We put a map grid reference on it. So if they are curious, and let's face it, people who travel are curious. They're going to try and find out where that place is by locking in the coordinates. And then moving forward into next week, I mentioned we're planning ahead. So we look, all marketing is about data, and one of the things we saw as we went into the crisis was our web stats just fell off a cliff. So no one was interested. Everybody was in hibernate mode, lockdown mode. And I think we're at the bottom of that graph at the moment. So we're just starting to see green shoots of people venturing out back onto the website, looking at travel, wanting to be inspired by travel. And in anticipation of that traffic coming back, next week, we're going back to Kuoni Heartland. All of my comms next week are going to be about special occasions, honeymoons. If you've had to delay your celebration this year, then of course you can go and do it next year. And do it with Kuoni, who are the special occasion experts. So that's what next week's comms are all about. And beyond that, who knows? I mean, we are just reacting to a very reactive situation.
You both mentioned about call to action and sales and pricing. Will you look to reintroduce pricing next week, or do you think it's still too early to have a sales message to your content?
It's really delicate, and we're trying to get that balance right. And Steve's already outlined that the problem. What you don't want is a groundswell of negative sentiments if you're being, if you're trying to sell holidays and it's just too early. So we tested in our email last week. Right at the bottom of the email, we put in Kuramathi in the Maldives. If you're interested for next year, go and have a look at a video. And then tomorrow's email will have. So tomorrow being Friday, so that will have a couple of offers right down at the bottom of an inspiration-led email, doing all the good stuff that Steve said. We're doing a Spotify playlist. We're doing authors, movies to watch. So surrounding all of this useful content is actually and if you are interested in next year, you can go and find it here. And then next week, we're going to slowly start to move up the tactical sales messages in order of the content. So that's our plan. But of course, if we get any groundswell of negative feedback, we'll just wind back.
Okay, and let's bring you in, David. Obviously, you work at Advantage, and Advantage looks after a large percentage of independent agents in the UK and Ireland. So I'd just be keen to hear what you guys are up to, what your strategy has been for helping agents navigate this with their marketing content. And I think you've got some new stuff coming up as well.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we're in a slightly different position, quite a unique position, that we're in the middle of both suppliers and members, and our membership is varied. We've got small one-man bands, and we've got some minipools, some sizable minipools. And it's, from my point of view, it's trying to support all of them, or as many of them as best we can, to navigate through the things that they need to be doing right now. And ordinarily, we run some marketing direct to some of our members' consumers on their behalf, which is all generally tactical, offer-led. And we've had to obviously pull that right back. And we did that. We had quite a few pieces of marketing that were due to run at the start of this, including some direct marketing. And we chose then, quite early on, before even lockdown happened, that the timing was probably wrong for that as the situation started to develop. So now we're kind of a few weeks down into lockdown. The first few weeks or so, my team's really been focusing on general comms, so trying to provide members advice around some of the industry regulations and changes in the furloughing process and more of the B2B side of things and the business operations. And now that is kind of starting to stabilise a bit. We're now starting to think about how we can better support them with their actual marketing through to their consumers.
Okay.
And from the start here, though, one of the messages that we've been trying to get out to them is that whilst they're kind of in the throes of sorting through refunds and rebookings, which is quite a messy situation to be in, it's still really important to also think about their customers that aren't necessarily booking right now, and to remain in contact with them as best they can, to remain front of mind for when hopefully we do start to see that recovery come to fruition. So with that in mind, the campaign that we're going to be launching tomorrow is all around giving members content that they can use that is not offer-led, that can help engage their customers. Now, at the end of the day, we don't have budgets really to play with at all at the moment, and I'm very appreciative that a lot of our members are in a similar situation where they don't have any spare cash to really start spending on marketing right now, especially as we don't really know where the light at the end of the tunnel is going to be and how far away it actually is. So we're looking at ways that we can provide them with some content that they can use in their marketing that isn't going to cost them anything, and all it really is going to cost them actually is a bit of time. So this campaign, it's around what we're trying to do is get people to be dreaming about their holidays again. So it's kind of underpinned by a new hashtag, bucket list reboot. And there are various forms of content that we'll be putting out for them. So one part of it is around family fun. So we're also appreciative that, you know, life at home, looking after kids, for those that have children, it's pretty tough. The homeschooling thing, if you're not fortunate enough to have a partner who's a school teacher, is pretty tough. But travel is also really fun. So we're putting some family-inspired content together, things like some destination-focused quizzes and puzzle sheets, some colouring in sheets. But also on the back of that, what we're asking members to do is to engage with their customers and get their customers to get their children to record some small snippets of video about their dream holiday or their holiday dreams, and encourage them to post that on our members, on the travel agents' social channels, and to be using that bucket list reboot hashtag. And then we will help curate that content as it comes through on the Instagram page that we set up some weeks back when we started coming into the situation, which is an unbranded, I don't know if you know it, it's Keep the World Traveling on Instagram. And we are hoping that we'll pull the whole industry together. This isn't about advantage, this is about supporting the industry and the members, that we can curate some of that content on there and start to get a bigger voice out in the public domain, that people probably should start thinking about their travel plans, not necessarily to book them right now, but don't give up the dream, basically. So another piece of the content that we're going to be doing is providing our members with a customer poll. Right now, you know, we think we know what the customer wants, but do we really? So the poll is really, it's a consumer-facing poll, some very simple questions for our members to ask their customers about their sentiment to travel right now and next year. So whether things like, you know, coming back to the bucket list reboot thing, whether they're either canning all travel plans or whether they're going to be thinking big and going for it as soon as the lockdown ends, but also whether things like their budgets are going to change, or whether they're going to stay in the UK or only travel short haul. So some very simple questions.
Yeah, that data will be so beneficial once you've completed that project, to know where they stand and what their intentions are. That'd be great.
Exactly, and you know, it can be shared back to them, and it can be shared within the industry. But I think if we can get our members behind that, just getting a good idea as to what the customer sentiment really is will help focus some of those marketing campaigns further down the line.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell, really.
Thank you. So, Steve, consumer sentiment has been mentioned quite a lot, and as I sort of alluded to earlier, there has been some negativity amongst consumers. For brands that are getting any flack and any negativity, I mean, do you think the advice should be the same, that they should be starting to relaunch their campaigns, or should they be a bit quieter maybe and just be more factual? I mean, what's the advice for any brands that are struggling to see the light amongst all the negativity they're receiving?
Well, first of all, being quiet probably isn't the answer, because if you're in a vacuum, it gets filled by someone else. So that's probably the most dangerous thing to do. If you are getting flack, it really goes down to what type of flack you're getting and what you can do as a brand about that flack. You know, if that criticism is legitimate and it is your fault, then obviously you should be seen to be trying to rectify it, or at least explain it. And I've seen, you know, ABTA on TV explaining the need for brands to have a bit of time to issue refunds and stuff like that. And there'll be a period where people don't want to hear that, right? They just want their money back because they're feeling vulnerable in a position that most of us, bar nobody really, has never been in before. So everyone's feeling a bit fragile and all the rest of it. So you'll be falling on deaf ears for a period of time. But it is about the sentiment you're putting out, the tone of voice you're putting out, and exactly what you're doing about the criticism that you're receiving. I think that's the real key. But that will all calm down. My view is that this will all start to calm down. I went out. I'm married to a northern girl, so I went out for what we call a big shop today. And compared to last week, and certainly 2 weeks ago, the atmosphere queuing for a supermarket and making your way around a supermarket was very much more relaxed than it was this time last week, and certainly in 2 weeks' time. So people are getting a little bit more used to it, and I think people will settle down. And so I don't imagine we'll get as much criticism of brands for some of the stuff they've been getting in the past couple of weeks. But it does all go back to the main principle of today, really, which is that you've got to make sure that you're not overselling. And I think what Kuoni are doing, which is kind of putting a sort of footnote in an email, is probably exactly the right thing to do. I mean, I hate to say all these complimentary things to Dean while he's on the screen.
Have you paid him, Dean?
But you know, that is the right thing to do. I hate to say it, but that is the right thing to do.
Okay, brilliant. And so obviously no one knows what the future is going to hold and where we go. So how do marketers plan in this current scenario? I guess you're kind of planning for all scenarios, or just for a gradual, you know, just take every day as it comes. What's everyone's approach here?
I'm going to be really dull here. So a lot of marketing is about data. So I'm looking for clues in the data. So I already mentioned before about what's happening with our web traffic. We've got multiple data points. So one of those also is that we get data from Google. And the most recent information we have from Google, and it's an indication of demand. That's people who are typing stuff into search engines. So the most searched type of holiday in Google last week was UK holidays.
Okay.
But right in at number 2 was people searching for Maldives holidays. So there's you know, looking at those kind of data clues, and it kind of give us the go ahead as to you know what's appropriate to talk about.
Sorry, Dean. I think the big challenge for marketeers is, and this is a personal view, is that the consumer will be a different type of consumer. I mean, I always shudder when I see people in travel talking about bounce backs, because I don't think we're in a V-shaped scenario, which is what bounce back implies, that we'll reset and we'll be back where we were. I think this is going to be, and I think EasyJet announced it today, they're coming for a more slower recovery, and I think that's probably the way it's going to be. And I think consumers will be maybe wanting to stay home or closer to the shores, because the repatriation thing, and you guys did brilliantly, and you know lots of operators did brilliantly, but that scared a lot of people. You know, tales of people being stuck in India or other places around the world unable to get home, that scars consumers. So I think what we're going to have to do, and this will go through to the marketing, and it is, as you quite rightly say, built on the foundation of data, but there's not a lot of that about at the moment. So the other thing that we have to think about is we're probably going to have to coax people back to traveling, much more than the type of sales and marketing we were doing beforehand. We will have to coax people back. And I would say this, and this is, you know, it's a horrible thing to say of silver clouds, you know, silver linings in clouds and things, but the lethargy that was in travel marketing has been shaken away. You know, when I go to World Travel Market every year, I do a lot of work with tourist boards where I'm introducing press conferences and VIP events, and they always start with a video. And by the end of the first day, I can't tell you which country's stand I'm on. They literally all look the same. And going back to my original point at the start now, where they're doing cook-alongs from Jamaica or Maltese language lessons, the marketing has understood that actually we've got to appeal to people in a different way now. And I think that will carry through after the lockdown is finished and people start thinking about travel again. So I personally think we'll see a shift in the way people market or brands market travel. I think that's a very real possibility.
I guess it's an opportunity, isn't it, for everybody to sort of rethink things, see what's working, and maybe while marketing is changing, I'm sure the traveller's mindset as a whole will change. You would assume that people, you know, holidays are already precious. We've been in lockdown for how long? You know, I'm desperate for my holiday. I imagine that holiday is going to become even more precious, and the investment that people will make, they'll really think about it maybe a bit longer. But it's interesting to see how people will respond to that, and I guess where we'll be in a few months' time.
Yes. And sorry, I don't want to be a dampener here, but there's going to be a recession, right? That is a reality. There is going to be a tightness around people's ability to spend money. And what that will mean in turn is a different type of marketing. We're not in the bull market that we've been in prior to COVID-19. We're going to be in a market where people are perhaps worried about their jobs if they've not already lost jobs. So maybe travel might move from being, you know, my dad, travel was a holiday was a luxury. His 2-week holiday once a year was a luxury. In my generation, it was a necessity. It was a stress relief. We needed to see the world and all the rest of it. I think we might go back to a hybrid between those two, where it won't quite be a luxury, but it won't quite be a necessity. It'll be somewhere in between. And that's where marketeers, particularly like Dean and David, are really going to have to get the sweet spot absolutely right, because otherwise they'll find it difficult to appeal to the market.
I think for our guys, it's going to be really important, especially for the smaller members, just to be really listening to what the customer wants. You know, we're looking at a micro level here, and rather than being able to look at the macro level, potentially of a big brand like Kuoni, and we're talking about potentially small independent businesses that might be working within a niche market, or they might be having a broad mix of customers. But if they can listen and have that ongoing conversation with their customers through this content and keeping engaged with their customers, then they're going to have a much better idea as to when they can go back out with kind of offer-led content and what type of destinations and content they should be going out with within their marketing. But if they don't have that ear to the ground and that connection with their customer, then those smaller guys are not going to have the insight that Google might give them, and could very much get it wrong. I also think now is a great time, as hopefully the refund process and that starts to subside, before a potential big bounce back might happen, the small business owners can take the time to really think about their brand and their proposition, take their time to be looking at things like their website and ensuring that they've got good content and good, basically their ship's in order. So things like making sure that their database is correct, and they've got as many people flagged as yes to marketing as they possibly can, or they've got their processes in place for GDPR, etc., in order to be in the best possible position for when we do come out of this.
And I guess the fact that so many companies have now had to furlough their teams, it does put extra strain on it. But I guess with something like what you're doing at Advantage and sharing that content, that's key, isn't it? Because you're a support system to them, and I know a lot of partners and for suppliers as well, and for tour operators, a lot of partners are helping with content. Hotels like Six Senses are doing wellness at home and different things. So I guess everyone is kind of helping each other out in this time. Is that something that you guys have been experiencing? Is it sort of you know, everyone's helping and got a great hand of help?
That's really how we managed to go about doing our business with relatively small resource, considering the size of the audience that we're actually supporting. You know, our relationships with our supplier partners, you know, Kuoni being one of them, and all of the others, and the tourist boards as well, to provide us with content and be willing to work with us, really helps make our job as that kind of intermediary to provide that content and that advice and support back down through to the customers actually possible. Yeah, so it's everybody's, we're all in it together, and we've got to find ways of helping each other through it.
Steve, on the all in it together and that everyone is helping, you mentioned before that it's also you need to differentiate. Is that a challenge for people when they're, you know, people are sharing sort of partner content or anything? Is there a fear that you may not necessarily be able to differentiate yourselves in that kind of manner?
I think it's about phases. So you know, there's a phase where personally I would not have advised any clients to be doing anything of a marketing nature, and I think Dean alluded to handing over the reins of social media to the PR people, and that was again, hate to say it, was the right thing to do. And then the next phase is where we are now, which is where we're, as an industry, uniting to tell people, you know, that we are there, the destinations are still there, we will be back. It's all those hashtags of that kind of theme. That's the right thing to do. But there comes a point where competition will kick in, because everybody wants their particular resort or their particular flight filled. And that's the bit where you're going to have to do the differentiation. So we're not quite there at the moment, although if I was advising a company, I would be trying to do something to differentiate myself right from the get-go, because I think the moment that it switches is very difficult to predict. It's not going to be next Thursday at 4 o'clock. It could be any moment. And therefore, the more advanced you are in terms of getting your brand differentiated, the better. Now, that's easier for some destinations and travel companies than it is for others. I accept that. Much more difficult to differentiate yourself if you're an airline. But BA and their poem, for example, is a you know, and their tribute to Britain. I think that was a terrific example again. So you are seeing differentiation going on, even if it's subtle at the moment. And that's the phrase. It's got to be subtle initially, and then eventually they'll step up a gear.
Okay, Dean, anything that's inspired you that you've seen from other companies? It doesn't have to be in travel, I guess. What's caught your eye through this period?
I mean, there's been, in fairness, there's been a lot of the same kind of content. There's only so much creativity you can have. So I have seen a lot of here's the 10 movies to go and watch on Netflix, you know, being released by brands. And I'm sure that you were all inundated with earnest messages from CEOs about how their company was. I mean, the one that springs to mind in terms of a bad example is I bought about 4 years ago a key safe, you know, to open my front door. Yeah. And their CEO wrote to me, sent me an email telling me about how they're coping. I mean, so I mean, I've seen plenty of bad stuff. But in terms of who's doing it well, I'd look at, and looking outside the travel industry. Facebook released a film today that really struck a chord, and I watched that all the way through, and that was about, you know, the key messages there were around you know, staying together, connectedness, you know, about being kind. So it was just a really powerful film. And then you have to take your hats off to the guys who are going out with TV adverts that clearly they haven't had the time to go and shoot new footage, so they're cobbling together old footage. So the likes of Sainsbury's and Tesco's and Lidl, you know, to still be spending money on TV. Of course, you know, it's you know, every day is like Christmas Eve to them in terms of their sales, so they can afford to do it. But I think they're doing that quite well in terms of how they're representing their brand in mass media. So supermarkets doing quite well, and Facebook, in my opinion.
Okay, and what about you?
Sorry, Holly. For me, Costa Coffee. I love a Costa Coffee. I'm on their little loyalty card. I'm a bit of a loyalty card tart, I have to say. As a marketeer, that's surprising. And they sent me a video on how to make an iced latte. I think it was on Friday. Fabulous. That's what I was missing. And they're teaching me how to make it at home. And I noticed Pizza Express doing it with their dough balls as well.
Yeah, Lucy's made those.
They're really good, though. That's keeping the brand alive in a very tangible way at home.
Yeah, that's great.
The one that sticks out in my mind is Travel Zoo. You know, it's their bread and butter is promoting travel offers. And I had an email from them the other day about, I don't know how you pronounce it, but the Portuguese custard tarts. And they gave a recipe for creating those custard tarts. You know, it's a way, again, of just keeping front of mind for when things do bounce back. But yeah, as Dean said, there's only so much creativity out there, and at the end of the day, everybody that hasn't got customers is scrabbling around to keep hold of any that they do have for when we can start to market back to them again.
But you need to be assured people will remember how brands are behaving, you know, and so you know,
yeah, there's been a lot on Twitter of like people calling out negativity and negative brands and things, you know, people that are furloughing staff incorrectly or not furloughing staff, and the way they're treating them with the redundancy. So I think there's a lot of opinions out there, and yeah, everyone will definitely remember. I just wanted to round off and end on talking about what the future lies, what we've got to come. I'd just be interested to get everyone's view on, we're seeing a lot of comments on sort of when travel should return to pay-per-click, and if it's not right time now, but when should people start doing that? I mean, that's a huge investment for a lot of brands that do PPC. What are your thoughts on that? Are you thinking that travel will return to be a big PPC player again soon, or not?
So I'll take that question first. I think, like all organisations, finances and that whole side of finance will be driving how much they're allowed to do, and how much marketing budget they're going to make available. So of the smaller budgets that will inevitably be available, people are going to look long and hard about where they spend them, and which is the most cost-effective way to spend that marketing budget. And then I guess my other point about the future, and sorry to end on a bit of a more somber point, is that this, as Steve already mentioned, this is not going to be some huge, great big bounce back, some huge V. Is that travel's going to come back slower than most other industries, because we won't have product to sell until those borders open, and until the transition period between those borders is opening. You know, we're not going to be like most industries. It's not going to be a quick comeback. It's going to be gradual. So, you know, we're certainly not planning for some great big comeback campaign. It's going to be slow and gradual and tactical as we go through that. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree completely again with Dean. I mean, I think the big thing here is that the only certainty at the end of this from a marketing perspective is that budgets will be smaller. That's inevitable. And that would demand a greater creativity from the marketing departments and the agencies that supply them. And so that will be an interesting thing to look at and monitor. And I do have a real belief in human beings. Human beings are at their very essence innovative. So whatever the market throws at us, you know, I mean, it's not the scale of the credit crunch and all the rest of it, but we've got over those and carried on. And this is a very, very resilient industry, travel per se, but marketing is a very innovative industry. And I do think innovation and creativity will come to the fore, because you get creative when you don't have a lot of money.
Okay, brilliant.
And from my point of view, again, we're right down the other end of the scale with a lot of our members that all they're worried about at the moment is keeping their business afloat. So when things do start coming back out, they're going to be watching every single penny. So they're not going to have a load of money to throw at marketing. So right now it's about looking after their existing customers, and how they deal with things like the refund process, etc., is what's going to be that lasting memory to either be able to really re-engage with those customers again or not. So it's just being mindful of what the customer needs right now, and then nurture those customers as we start to come back out. And obviously when bookings start coming back in and cash flow starts happening again, then they might then be able to look at investing in acquiring new customers. Okay.
Brilliant. Well, it'd be good to catch up with you guys maybe in a few weeks' time to see where we are, because I mean, every day seems to bring about a different challenge. So it'd be good to catch up with you guys in the future to see how things have changed or evolved, what new campaigns you might be working on at those points. But thank you very much for joining me. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So thank you for taking the time. It was great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Holly.